So I may have shared once before, in these 4 years we've been together, about my great-grandmother, Mary Olive Key. And she, if you remember, maybe not, we've all slept since then, but she grew in an oil field town, and there were shotgun houses with family after family that were just stacked together to be able to work that field. And of course, as you're all stacked together, you might tend to get a little bit close. And so these families, particularly the children, knew that Mary Olive was the one where if they were ever hungry, or if they ever were cold, or just needed a place to be able to rest and relax, that they could bust up in her house and scoot their little rear ends on her bench over by her dining room table, such as it was, just basically a slab of wood and some legs. But there'd always be a pot cooking, and she would always say, "Y'all come, welcome, I'm so glad you're here." Well, as it's told in my family, one of the things that she said often whenever my grandmother, her daughter, or my mother, her great-granddaughter, had kind of a little spat with a friend or was harboring some resentment about something that had happened in their lives, particularly related to a person or people in their orbit, she said, "Family and the church are the two places where you can't choose whose butts are in the seat." Isn't it true? Can't choose whose butts are in the seat. You've got to sit with them, live with them, and find a way to get along. It is true, isn't it? Just like death and taxes, there are certain things that are sure in life. And we find ourselves today thinking about those pieces that are inevitable and how we might have a vision, if not a way of thinking, if not a frame of mind, or a way of the heart that will help us survive, even thrive through those times when we accept those who are at our table that we may not have chosen. When we hear the words emered from Jesus, there were a lot of things pulling at his time and in his attention, but he was using the timeless words of the prophet Isaiah to begin reminding people singularly what he was for. This is really kind of if you ask what his function was in the world, it was indeed that of giving sight to the blind and setting people free. And in a way, he was saying all of this, talking about an external freedom experienced in various ways, when really he was inviting us into a posture, a practice, and a way of being that would free first our very selves. When we talk about the beloved community, sometimes it's a term or an idea that if you've been around Christian circles for a while, it can kind of ring hollow, or it might feel like a very lofty ideal. The beloved community was a term that was really coined in the early 20th century by Josiah Royce. And he founded the Fellowship for Reconciliation, whom Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was also a part. And MLK took that concept of the beloved community in the Christian tradition and began to popularize it and really help the deeper meaning to sink into the lives of people of faith who cared about the plight of the oppressed, who cared for those who were hurting, and he captured their imagination. And he allowed them to begin to think of the goodwill of those all over the world that we have been called to tend and to consider. For Dr. King, the beloved community wasn't some lofty utopian goal to be confused with that image that brings us such relief and comfort of the peaceable kingdom that we find in various parts of Scripture, where lions and lambs coexist together in idyllic harmony. The The beloved community, really, if you understand the core sense of what it means and what it actually asks and requires of us, is just the opposite. And it took me a few years to really understand this in a way that lived in my bones. The beloved community, for him and for us, was a realistic, achievable, not lofty goal that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and trained in a philosophy and in methods of nonviolence. Now, you say nonviolence, well, that's stuff that happens over there, this sense of violence, those wars that we see on Apple News and the murders that we hear about on the other side of town, not in our neighborhood. But this notion of violence speaks to all of those macro experiences of harm and pain, but it also speaks to the micro as well. Even those that can be experienced by one person, one vulnerable human being like you and me. It goes from the larger things to the violences that we inflict on each other every single day. Perhaps a violence of our words as we speak poorly about someone's reputation or character or malign them in a way that is not true. Or the ways that we might try to hold down those around us because of our own need to have a leg up or to not engage with full self-awareness our own insecurity or fear. This is an experience of community that isn't without interpersonal or group or even international conflict. Instead, he recognized and calls us to recognize that conflict is an inevitable part, even a restorative, eventually, part of the human experience. He believed that conflicts could be resolved among us peaceably, and adversaries could be reconciled through a mutual, determined commitment to heal and to not hurt. A commitment to heal and to not hurt. This core vision of Jesus that he spoke about is in that same vein, if not the beloved aspect of community is an outgrowth of this. And that healing may not always look like full reconciliation and restoration of a relationship. It doesn't even require immediate forgiveness. It may also look like instead setting healthy boundaries with a person or people, not to have them cause further pain. But it's less about what happens externally in a relationship than what happens within. It's really where our engagement with beloved community begins. This practice enables us to find ourselves in another. This sense of beloved community is a quality of the heart. It allows ourselves to come to understand that each new person we meet has the potential to help us grow and know ourselves and the divine in a deeper way, Henry Nouwen says. Or it could be a way for us in our conflicts with those we've known forever that have inflicted in immediate and seemingly impossible pain to heal too. And especially then, those are times where healing and deeper personal understanding, growth, and fruitfulness in ourselves is possible. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, I know it seems like I repeat that again and again, but for those that aren't familiar, I want to make sure that we all feel like we belong to this message, belong to this sense of possibility. John Wesley said, "To separate ourselves from a living body of Christians is a grievous breach of the law of love. It's only when our love grows cold when we think of separation from our brethren." I wonder for us what this whole sense of it being a disposition of the heart looks like. I can think a lot of different stories, but I guess in the vein of the people you're at table with, I think about a story that a rabbi told. Maybe some of you have heard it, about the long spoons. Remember? Where each person in this parable, per se, are given a long, long spoon, much longer than could ever pick up the bounty of food that was before them, and turned inward to be able to feed oneself. And so this rabbi was talking about the definition or a picture or an experience of what it is to know heaven or to struggle in the experience of not heaven, the underworld, whatever you might call it. And he said that the experience of hell, if you will, would be one where we are bound and determined to continue to feed ourselves with that long spoon and go unbelievably hungry with our closeness or resentment or lack of seeing differently. But instead, he said that the experience of heaven and fulfillment and the satiation of our hunger is beginning to scoop up that food. And no matter who's on the other side of the table, especially if they are ones that you're a little hesitant to feed them anyway. And they, in the same way, are called to feed you with that long spoon. And in that way, with every choice, with every decision in this disposition of the heart through a commitment to beloved community, all are fed. No one goes hungry. Reverend Victoria Stafford said it this way, and with some of the, even the personal struggles that I've had in my own life, it's resonated in a meaningful way. She said, the goal of beloved community is reconciliation. It is not to destroy your opponent, nor cast them out, but to stay in the struggle until love wins. It's to stay in the struggle until love wins. I think this word is important for us. We may find ourselves thinking back to relationships or experiences where it was perhaps traumatic or a struggle or to the point where it wasn't safe to be in that place. I'm not talking about those encounters. I think a point of separation there is well placed. But when we talk about the importance of this way and posture of the heart, it's important in a number of ways, especially today. It's important for us as we think about this turn of the year into an election year in our country, with all of the potential pain and vitriol and struggle that may come from the words that are spoken across the aisle and even across families in the midst of that discernment we share together. It might be important as we inaugurated a new governor and leadership for our state's future, with all sorts of emotions that are wrapped up in that are both hope-filled and fearful. It's also important in the struggles that you and I face in our relationships that matter, and it's especially important in the wake of experiencing a local church like ours that is deeply committed to each other and strong and stable. And yet in the global church, there have been myriad of divisions and resentments that seemingly will never be resolved because we refuse to be in the same room or even the same denomination. This message is one that you and I, in our hearts, in our heads, in our very souls, need now more than ever. So who are the people around your table? Who are the people around your table? When you think about the love that you resemble or the love that you allow to grow within you, does it reflect a God whose mercy is over all his works? Does it soar above the bounds that we so easily place between each other? Does it embrace neighbors and strangers, friends and enemies, not only the good and gentle, as John Wesley said, but the disobedient, evil, and even the ungrateful in your life? Is it the kind of love that embraces every soul that God has made, every child in humanity? Maybe. Probably not. I want you to think about the people around your table, and especially one. Whether it is a person in your family, a person in your workplace, a friend, even across the miles, that perhaps you are not in complete harmony with them. Would you think about that person, conjure their voice in your mind? Maybe you wish that today they didn't scoot their rear end across the bench to be sitting next to or across from you. But if they're there still, can you feed them? Can you feed them with grace, with compassion, even with all that has happened between you? Can you have regard for their goodwill in spite of and in the midst of injury, pain, or vehement disagreement? Can you? Can you feed them? May this be our question and our prayer and the disposition of our hearts as we continue to live, to model, and to gather in beloved community. Amen.